I need your help in testing something. It is an MVP that is built based upon some scientific research. It won't cost you anything. It just takes maybe a few minutes of your time. But I could really use a second pair of eyes on this, mainly because this application was built based upon research that has been conducted since the 70s in regards to the minute changes that happens in various biosignals of humans right before there is a decision making that needs to be happening that has to do with, for example, something we anticipate happening, something we are trying to see, whether it's good or bad for us, or anything that has to do with our gut reaction towards this decision. Let me first explain the research behind it first, and then I'll share about the MVP. So essentially in the 70s, there were a few scientists that embarked on a journey to see whether the way in which we define, for example, the human instinct, exactly like, for example, animals have, where they sense things that are not necessarily visible to the naked eye at the moment, whether they could measure that and whether they could see if it had anything to do with some biosignal changes. And some of these scientists looked at the electrical activities of the brain. Others looked at the heart rate variability of the heart. And over the course of the following, I think, 20 years or so, there were a handful of research studies that were done and published. And if I'm not mistaken, it's about maybe 25 or 30 research studies, and I have read all of them. And they essentially talk about different findings that they were able to show, where there are some slight changes in the biosignals within the human body that happens right before a stimuli is presented. So essentially what these scientists were trying to do is to see whether we could measure the human instinct, or the gut feeling, if you will, at the biosignal level, in this case the electrical activities of the brain or the electrical activities of the heart. For the electrical activities of the brain, they used EEG devices, and for the electrical activities of the brain, of the heart, they used HRV, heart rate variability. And they did some calculations, and they had the human participants perform specific tasks, and right before performing the task, they had them guess or anticipate the outcome of that. So the first studies that we are aware of was to examine changes in the brain's electrical activities that preceded an unknown stimuli that were conducted by some scientists, and they observed that there are some significant large contingent negative variation, which is a slow brainwaves activities potential associated with anticipation or expecting a specific outcome even before something happened. And there were some additional studies that were being done, and right before, for example, a participant was presented with a target stimuli, these researchers asked them to guess what they believe the outcome would be. They also use some gambling ways, such as roulette, where they had the participants guess what the outcome of a roulette gambling game would be. And at the same time, these scientists measured the electrical activities of the brain and or the electrical activities of the heart. And so it turned out that there are some physiological predictors of future event that happens within the human body that has to do with the autonomous nervous system of the human body. And the various experiments that they did, definitely heart rate. They also did some studies on blood volume, as of course, as well as other heart measures. And it turned out that there are some specific minute changes that happens at the electrical activities of either the brain or the heart a few seconds before a future emotional stimuli was going to be presented to the participants, the human participants of these studies. And it turned out that it had also to do something with the activation in some regions near the amygdala. Right before, for example, even some pictures were shown to the participants. In other words, it turned out that either brain or the heart appeared to receive some pre-stimulus information a few seconds right before a future stimuli is about to happen, something about to happen. And whatever the test was for example, with these studies. And because they were able to replicate these tests, they were able to publish some papers. Having said that, being a scientist, we do need to go through a lot of rigorous experiments. And so because there is not a huge volume of research on this, we're still not sure what all these tests mean. And we also cannot be as speculative as your non-scientific people would be. A lot of people jump into conclusion and say they talk about various things, but as a scientist we cannot do that. We have to go through rigorous planning and research, and so there is still a lot to Nonetheless, some of these studies do suggest that there is something to be learned in terms of these very tiny, subtle changes in the electrical activities within the biological organisms, in this case humans, where there are some slight changes even before something happens, but it's always a few seconds before. And it is the electrical activities either go slightly higher or they go slightly lower. So it really depends on what the stimuli is. And obviously these research papers are very long, so I'm just giving you a very high eagle eye view overview of these. I also wanted to mention that the human biology is so extremely complicated and has evolved so much, so that the more we learn about it, the more we realize how much we don't know. And so there is a lot of calculations that is happening at the biological level, at our sensory level, that none of us are really privy to or aware of, because there's so much data that comes in from our sensory system, and then there's so much calculation that goes into it. In this case, for example, the brain takes in a lot of sensory information, and then it does a lot of calculation. A lot of times we're not even aware of it, nor do we remember them. However, they are being saved and perceived at the biosignal level, even at the cellular level. The fact that we're not able to articulate them, remember them, or record them at our conscious level does not mean that our bodies as well as our neurons, our brains, do not perceive and absorb all these sensory information. The reason our biological entities are programmed to absorb all of these sensory information is because it needs data to survive. It needs to know what is happening in the surrounding and whether there are predators around us and so forth to be able to sort of survive. And as a result, it absorbs and sucks in all that information without us even being aware of it, and does all the different calculations within itself. And one way that we could argue our so-called gut feeling or intuition is that it is actually a result of all the predictive analysis that our neurons and our cells are conducting every single second of our lifetime in order to survive. And so one of the major role of our brain that we've come to learn is that it is a predictive analysis the machine. Reason we are learning more and more about the brain as well as other parts of our bodies that they are very good at predicting is because we are gradually through different studies learning more and more how making a prediction at the biological level is detrimental to our survival. And we could then argue that that is part of the reason our bodies have evolved to be the perfect statistical machine where it predicts. And so we gather a lot of information from the environment, and then in the back end, it does all the predictive analysis. And this could non-scientifically be a potential way that we could argue and describe the gut feeling, the intuitiveness, the intuition of both humans. Where and the gut feeling and the intuition are there to help us with our survival mechanism. But in actuality, it's all about our biology, neurons and cells that have evolved and have learned to gather as much data and information from the surrounding, process it in the back end without us even being aware of it, or for us to do it consciously, and then put us in a situation where hopefully we're able to predict the near future such that we could make better decisions, hence using our intuitions for those of us who have learned it to make those decisions, because it has to do with our survival. It has to do with the most basic animalistic instinct that we need to survive and be able to also move on to the next generation. That might be partly one way that we could potentially explain what intuition and gut feeling is. We are getting more and more sort of smarter about understanding our biology, but we are still learning a lot. And so exactly the same way, let's say 100 years ago, people were superstitious and they thought X and Y meant this and that. But then through improved scientific findings, we now know why. The exact same thing is happening 100 years from now. We will know much more about our biology than we know today. And so a lot of things that we maybe take on to use superstitious to explain 100 years from now probably will have clear-cut findings where there is no more doubt in our mind as to how to explain it scientifically. And so that's why the superstitious is gradually hopefully living our lives and our societies, because we do need to be able to explain things in a rational way. And there's always, in my experience, a rational and scientific explanation. The reason that we don't know it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that we're not ready to make those discoveries because we don't have the technology or the bandwidth. Based on these findings that we have so far, at least since the 70s, there are some indication as to, for example, the brain electrical activities and or the heart electrical activities show some slight changes within specific time frame right before a stimuli happens. And it might be so that these are all because we have accumulated a lot of data, and so our bodies are predicting what might happen. And as a result, today we call it intuition. 100 years from now, we'll be able to tell that this has to do with our bodies. They're just created to be a statistical machine to predict. Now, going back to the MVP that I talked about, based on this research, there is an algorithm that we've worked on, and this algorithm is based on the slight changes in the heart rate variability, where the algorithm calculates the current with and compares it to what might be in the future throughout some mathematical calculations based on research, as well as how it was before, based on the collected data over a period of time. And based on those comparison, added to the mix the time frame, specific time frame where this calculation, internal gut feeling, intuition calculation happening, this MVP is designed to show what your intuition is telling you, whether you are aware of it or not. Some of us are aware of it all the time, but some of us are not. So let's say that we want to make a decision about something. Let's say we want to go out tonight. I'm like, I don't know, should I go out or not? Probably our bodies already have that information and already knows that decision, but maybe we're a little bit emotional about it, and we are deliberately or non-deliberately ignoring our intuition. What this MVP does is that it helps us to read our heart rate variability changes, and based on that algorithm, calculates it to us and just right off the bat show us what our intuition is telling us about that particular decision. The MVP is extremely easy to use. It is uploaded into the App Store, whether you have an iPhone or an Android, and you could either have an Apple Watch to use with it. If you don't, you can use the your fingertip, place it on the camera lens of your phone, whether it's iPhone or Android, and then it does the calculation for you. The first time that you use the app, it needs to calibrate, and so it'll take about a minute for it to calibrate because it needs to understand your heart rate and then measure your heart rate variability at the in the back end. And then it once you go through that motion of calibration, then you could literally just ask the question that you have, and it'll take about, I think, 10 to 15 seconds for the app to do that calculation. All the time that you ask that question, let's say, should I go out tonight or not? I'm not sure if I should go out and meet this person tonight, for example. At the same time, you put your finger on the camera lens in the back of your phone, and then you keep it there, because through the fingertip we are able to calculate the heart rate from which the heart rate variability is being calculated. So all the while that you put it there, you ask the question. The best result is when you close your eyes and you you look at yourself doing that thing or saying that thing that you want to do, because then you're putting yourself in that situation. And then it takes the app, and then you click on the app, it says click to start, you click, and at the same time you focus on your question, and then just take 10 seconds or something like that. Once the app has that information, it just takes for it a while to another few seconds for it to give you an answer, and you will get 3 answers, either yes, no, or maybe. If you get a maybe, it just means that you need more information. It just means that your body does not have enough information to make that call. And in those times, I usually don't do it or don't say it. But if it says a clear no, that means that your body has had enough information to make a call about that decision. And if it's yes, then it's definitely a hell yes. So that means that your body. Essentially, what the MVP, this app, does is that it tells you what your body is telling you. Some people tell me, they believe that this app is the one that is making the decision. That is far from the truth. It literally compares your HRV and calculates it, and based on the scientific research that I just mentioned, does those calculations in its algorithm that we have written, and based on that tells you what your body is telling you. So essentially you are reading your own intuition, but it is this application, this algorithm, that is doing it for you. If you don't need it, and you already know the answer, obviously you don't need to use it. But there are times where we need to make some decisions that we're really not sure about. And so those are the time that then using this application would potentially be very beneficial. Having said that, please see it as an entertainment and educational purposes only. So don't come back and say, oh, I wanted to make this huge decision and I did it based on this app and it went sour. It's not the app that does anything for you. All it does is that it calculates your biosignals based on your data and tells what your gut feeling tells you, because there are some nuances and there are some changes based on the scientific research that we know up until at least now about what different changes in biosignals tells about our gut feeling about what something. I need your help with is help me test this application. I will add the link of the application's name below so you can find it yourself. It's free. I'm not asking you for any money or anything like that. It's totally free, and I don't want you to do anything you don't want to do. It just takes a few minutes. All I'm asking is if you have the time to test it, and then if you found it useful or any type of comments you have or feedback you have, if you would leave it as a comment on this video, that way I can also grasp some understanding and gauge the user expectation from using this and see whether it helps or not. I have done this test with other users also, and I felt like I had to explain to people that this is not like something that the app is making that decision for you. It's essentially all it does is that it calculates your own biosignals and it gives it back to you. So it's don't think of it as somebody else who's telling you what to do. It's essentially your own intuition that is telling you yes, no, maybe. And so, but I'm very curious if you wanted to test it out and let me know what you think. If there are any issues or anything like that, feel free to leave comments. I usually cannot answer direct messages, so some people email me. I really can't respond to emails or direct messages, but I do respond to comments to my videos. So if you want to leave a public comment on my videos, please do so. All right, well, thanks for watching, and I look forward to your feedback. Thanks. Bye.